and traditional medicine practitioners from Canada, India, and around the world. Together, we work with local healthcare workers, traditional medicine providers, governments, and community members to improve maternal and infant well-being and reduce preventable maternal and infant mortality. We started with a focus in Canada and India primarily, but out of interest, we've actually expanded to other countries as well. MyCan recognizes that the only way to make a truly lasting impact is to look at all of the determinants of maternal and infant health. And because of this approach, we have 4 pillars: health, education, and clinical skills training, community economic development, innovation, and research and accountability. This webinar is part of our first pillar. And today's webinar is on the traditional Chinese and Indigenous medicine program in British Columbia, Canada, an integrative care model. Our speaker today is Dr. Rachel Eni. Dr. Eni is a traditional Chinese medicine acupuncturist, currently delivering services to the members of the Snuneymuxw First Nations in their healthcare center on Vancouver Island. Dr. Eni is also a former associate professor from the University of Manitoba College of Medicine Community Health Sciences, where she focuses her research and teaching in maternal and child health, mental health, and environmental health impact programs in Indigenous communities. Along with Indigenous medicines, her current work focuses on racism in healthcare and decolonization of health. Her sons and granddaughter are First Nations and are the motivation behind her work. So we're very excited and very lucky to have her on board today. I think this is a topic that a lot of people are very interested in. So we really look forward to hearing your input. As with all of our public webinars, I have to say the following disclaimer. There we go. This course and handouts may contain general information about medical conditions and treatments. The information is not advice and should not be treated as such. We have the rest of the information you are welcome to read. If you have questions during the webinar, please write them in the comment or chat box at the bottom of the screen or on the side, depending on the device you have. What we'll do is we'll capture them and then ask the questions at the end of the lecture. Please don't be shy about asking questions. These webinars are about stimulating discussion and how we can help each other work together to support each other in our efforts to improve maternal and infant health. So without further ado, I'm going to pass this on to Dr. Rachel Eni. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Emily, and welcome everybody. Let me get a hold of the screen here. All right, so here we are. I'm going to describe the work that we're doing in British Columbia, combining traditional medicines, the Indigenous people here with the traditional Chinese medicine. So our clinic is on Vancouver Island. Just give you a little preview of who we are. The First Nation population on the island is somewhere around 39,331. These statistics are 2015, so they're a few years old. Total population on the island is 759,000 plus. So we're representing 5.18% of the total population on the island. Our clinic is on Snuneymuxw First Nation in Nanaimo. Nanaimo is center of the island inner coast. The language is Hulkuminum. I keep hearing everybody say it in my head, and I was practicing, but the language is very difficult, very different from English anyways. Reserve land area, we have 266 hectares of land and a population of 1,812. So here's a map of Canada, and if you look at the west coast, at the southern part, you see Victoria. So here's where we're situated. This is our island, and Snuneymuxw is one of the First Nations. You could see it on the inner coast at Nanaimo there. It's the Nanaimuk First Nation. Okay, just to orient you to our work, we did a video when we first started, and it's just a couple minutes long. I want to show it to you. It'll give you a good idea. It's a really nice video of introducing how the project started. So have a look.
The intent of this project is to provide traditional Chinese medical services to the members of this community as part of a pilot for responding to really what is an epidemic of chronic disease and mental health and addiction issues in First Nation communities, not just in British Columbia, but across the country.
We do a lot of herbs and medicines from the mountains, so there's similarities between the two cultures. My late mom used to do all the medicines and used to make me take it. Something I'm missing right now. But now we're into Chinese medicine, and it's coming back.
We use acupuncture needles and herbs, even lifestyle advice, so diet and exercise, to figure out how we could help people feel better physically, mentally, and even spiritually.
I think there's a lot of value in it because it treats the whole body, not just one symptom. I think it's healthier for the individual.
Eventually, actually, we hope to see some First Nation young generations could come and learn and become practitioners and come back to their own community and serve their own people.
So our purpose was to create an integrative model of health and healing based in the First Nation community, one that would encourage active participation of individuals in embracing wellness through exploration of health promotion and prevention strategies. So it's really loaded, but there's a lot in there. Trying to figure out an integrative model of health, trying to be more holistic about health, about healing, one that would bring the people into the process of working with their health rather than people as patients, and one that would bring in their traditional ways, their heritage, something that would be more meaningful as an act of health doing or health making with the people, to explore individual family health and responsibility in connection to culture and ecology, and to develop dialogue. So to develop dialogue between traditional practitioners worldwide. What are our commonalities? What are our differences? And then to learn from one another. So it was really a lot of the drive behind what we were trying to set up. Looking at health as a wholeness of being and trying to talk, so bringing into discussion, what is health? What is wellness? What does it mean? What does it mean to the practitioners? What does it mean to the people that we're serving? What are responsibilities that we have to self, to family, community, society? Really bringing in those values of traditional societies in caring for the self, in caring for the family, and the difference between how do we care about ourselves, but keep our responsibilities to family. So one really strong example of that, I deal with it, especially now during the pandemic when people's stresses are so high, is let's say if I'm dealing with mothers or grandmothers who are really stressed and really stretched in all kinds of directions, caring for their family. How do I, as a practitioner, work with people and help people to understand how to care for self when there's no time for self? So really questions that I still don't have the answers to, but a lot of discussion going on every day at the community level, in the clinic, one-on-one, within our entire wellness program on how do we care for ourselves? How do we care for our families and our communities together? We're looking at transformation of illness from trauma, histories of trauma, towards realizing authenticity. We talk about things like, okay, so there's survival and there's thriving. How do we bring the nation, after everything that's gone on in the history of the nation, to a position where the community is now thriving? So we talk about philosophical underpinnings. So a lot of what I'm talking about now, it's stuff that I pulled in to try to give you a view of what this is all about. But these are conversations that go on in our health center all the time in the process of our doing work. We, ever since the past year, we have a wellness coordinator. So the wellness coordinator brings in a group, all of us, practitioners, elders, people working with the community, and members of the community, to have this sort of work going on about wellness and how we can keep working with theoretical, philosophical, the stories, the activities behind the work that we do. So global traditional medicines do share a common foundation. Indeed, Western and traditional medicines too have a lot in common. This project was built not on our differences per se, but on opportunities for integration. Over the course of cooperation between practitioners from different disciplines and philosophical backgrounds, we were able to discover our commonalities and thus refer clients between us, develop diagnoses and treatment plans sensibly, appropriately, and to the client's greatest advantage. So worldviews are shaped within cultures. They develop in interaction between cultures to determine how we perceive and interpret the world around us. We see the world as cyclical, continuous, uncertain, recurring, and fluid. The interconnection between people and environments, events, time, and space. So here we have the importance of heredity, of life experiences, of traumas, dreams, family connections on both sides of the border. So Nanaimo has family in the United States and it has family here. And so when I talk about this, I talk about histories of like what people have gone through when they're over the course of their life. But also over the course of the lives before them, their grandmothers, their parents, and people bring these stories into the clinic room with them. We use it in terms of healing and moving forward. Ideals within worldview are balance, harmony, and equity. From these ideals, we ask questions about our health, like what are the factors that disrupt the balance of our health, and how can we reestablish internal and community harmony? Human health and environments, the land and its resources, natural, human-made, are interconnected. How we plan our programs, how we interconnect our programs, where we place our programs are all questions that we take into consideration. Effective healthcare delivery necessitates a balance between the programs, formal and informal, supportive of individual, family, and community level priorities, interests, and needs. So for me, coming from the outside, I had to learn about what actually informal and formal programming means within a First Nation and how they're delivered. It's a little bit different than it is outside of a First Nation. And then holistic, inclusive, preventing disease, treating illness, creating health supports, and trusting environments. Holistic approach, paying attention to community welfare, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual aspects of being. So just yesterday, I was working with someone who told me, I have a very sensitive back. And I asked, okay, well, what makes it sensitive? What do you mean by that? She said, it's a spiritual thing. So spiritual, so we had a discussion about what that actually means. So the idea of spiritual is quite real and in my daily work. I have to understand what people are meaning and where people are coming from. And that all happens through dialoguing, through talking and getting to know people and listening to stories and repeating the stories in my head and bringing them back into the clinic the next day. So it's quite interesting when you're dealing with different traditions and different ways of looking at the world and learning from one another. It's an ongoing process that takes place all the time in the clinic. Clients are actively engaged in the process of transforming their health journeys from illness to authenticity. Just being able to see what's possible in coming to health, in changing, in changing one's lifestyle and having a healthier lifestyle. The transformations since we opened the clinic in 2017 are gorgeous to see. We have here a caregiver society with multiple levels of caregiving. So Nanaimo First Nation is a hard-working First Nation. There's a real value and a lot of stories in hard work and putting work first. And the people are caregivers. So there's this story about holistic healing along the shaman with the cracked hand. So there are two shamans. One of them, the one closer to the nation, has a crack. And in order to do his work, when it gets heavy, sometimes he can't do it because he has a cracked hand. So the other shaman comes in and helps. So there's this helps him in doing the work. The very important story to the First Nation of a caregiving society, of how each of us is there to help caregive the caregiver and how each of us work together. So there's no superstar, there's no one program that fits all, but all of us integrated, helping each other in the best way that we can. Burnout, especially now with the pandemic, is a big thing. This is where leadership comes in. There's a great love and care in the First Nation. I wish I could tell with my words how that is, but it's a very beautiful thing and very much a part of the kind of a health center that is really holistic. What it is when you bring love and care into a health center is a beautiful thing. Okay, so with Chinese medicine, it too is a system of medicine based on the idea that energy flows through pathways. We call it qi, through channels or meridians in the body, and through the body to the external environments, inclusive of universal energy, space, and time. So you could see that these are foundational theories that are in common to what I had just described with the traditional indigenous medicines. Also, it connects with Western medicine. So you could look at qi as oxygen flowing through the vessels within the body, organs classified as having functions, and psychosomatic characteristics. So in common with disciplines within Western philosophic, like psychiatry, like Western medicine. And there are blockages and imbalances via internal or external evils, like traumatic experiences and pathogens. So similar idea to the balances and imbalances within the body. Destruction of our lived environments, unresolved grieving, intergenerational traumas affect our health and can lead to acute and chronic illnesses. So we think of imbalances as opposed to pathology. And there are several causes to the imbalances that can come from inside or outside. For example, our lifestyle factors, like what we eat, or how rested we are, or whether we're addicted to drugs and alcohol. So the interesting thing, both Chinese medicine and the traditional indigenous medicines incorporate symbolic interpretations of our health and healing. So it's really beautiful. What we do is we use storytelling as healing. And it's quite interesting because I can have a lot to participate with that, coming from the perspective that I come from as well. So the TCM traditional bases, one comes from Taoism, emphasizing nature, the universe, environmental influences on health and disease, circular flow of life, energy or qi that includes the environment within its circuits, and highlighting the environment's role in maintaining equilibrium upon which healthy life depends. The tradition matches Western systems approach to medicine, looking at organisms as fully open systems. So of course the environment is a very huge, I won't even say part, but it's we within the indigenous medicines don't see individuals apart from their environments, the environments that they're in. A huge issue coming into this project is the problem with health inequity in Canada. So it's well known that we have a gap in health and in the delivery and accessibility of healthcare services to Indigenous Canadians. Colonization and recent emphasis on global colonization is a recent focus on global discussions, including racism and the need to decolonize. So the issue of the health inequity, that the root cause comes from this history of colonization. So when we talked about what do we do in terms of creating this health program, that we had that root cause in mind. It's beyond symptom-based care to the root and persistent causes of health inequality. And what we want to do is move beyond this colonization, incorporating strong First Nation leadership, vision, cooperation within the nation, and advocacy. So the work comes from within the First Nation leadership. We're building on intrinsic wisdom as opposed to determinants of ill health. Instead of looking at, well, let's do a list of what's wrong or where we're behind in the First Nation. We're building now on intrinsic wisdom, on what is indigenous wisdom. So the wisdom is coming, the philosophy of the work that we do comes from the inside. Unique development of programming, and this is going beyond the pilot. So the pilot program, I'll describe a little bit more of that right away. The pilot program started and ended in 6 months, and the program is still going on today. So, the history of colonization in Canada, devastation of Indigenous lands and resources, traditions, languages, medical systems. We talk about colonized bodies from conception to death, assimilation, supremacy, marginalization, racism, medicalization, corporatism, and large-scale mining and hydroconstruction. So those are a lot of words, but just to get it all into this little, this very short presentation, what we've had here is an onslaught of negative impact that has affected the lives of people throughout several generations. Within medicine, we also had legality issues, so that First Nation people were not allowed to practice their traditional medicines. And then simultaneously, there was a belittling. So it wasn't seen as scientific. It wasn't seen as it didn't hold as much merit or any merit compared to the system of Western medicine. So this all had an impact on the way people perceived their own medicines, their own traditions. And then also alongside that, we had really the superiority of Western medicine in terms of combating infectious diseases. So that all of this had a toll on how people practiced or took forward the knowledge of their traditional medicines. And then personal accounts. So another thing too is, and a lot of the stories that come into the clinic are stories of trauma that people had with healthcare practitioners in the past, in their lives. And and trying to reestablish trust in coming to see healthcare providers today. So really interestingly, I'm a person who comes in with needles to a nation of people who have had developed trust issues because of things that have gone on within a colonized approach to medicine. People have gone to residential schools and seen dentists when they were younger that just came in and pulled out all their teeth. So really stories of traumatic experiences with healthcare providers. So it's really neat. People come in and say, you've got needles and I trust you. So it's really nice to see that regaining trust with our program. So there are differences. I just really quickly, not to focus on this, but China was not colonized. So there are differences. Like I said, we have commonalities, but there's also differences. But still in China, through a very different history, Western medicine took a lot of, really gained in influence. The difference was, even with Mao Zedong, he did have an interest in integrating. And so today we have a really strong system of integration between Western and TCM practice. So with what we're doing, it was really interesting to learn that history through our TCM partners at the Tzu Chi Foundation. How do you develop a strong and integrated system of traditional medicines with Western medicine that would benefit the people and would benefit them by bringing what is First Nation to a higher esteem for the people themselves. So when we developed our project, just would like to say just some nuts and bolts of who everybody was. The partners, the people who came together to start talking about this, was at first it was the First Nation Health Authority. The First Nation Health Authority is like the provincial health authority for the First Nations across the island. Tzu Chi Foundation. Tzu Chi Foundation is a philanthropist and community. They run Chinese medicine services and schools around the world. They have one here in Vancouver. Simon Fraser University, the Faculty of Health Sciences. So we came together to start to discuss this way back in 2015. So that was 2 years of planning and discussion before the pilot study came to be. So we came together with the intention to develop the pilot project that combines local Indigenous medicine with traditional Chinese medicine in order to transform health in the First Nations. So very important goal for the discussion was always a transformation of health. It was within discussions between the three partners that the idea of the pilot project was conceived to develop traditional medicines, beginning with a First Nation community. So we didn't know which First Nation community we'd be working with to begin with. There were other First Nations that were interested. The problem was we needed one that had space, and space was a real issue. Like, people are trying, a lot of First Nations here were, especially at the time, trying to get funding to build health centers or to make their health centers bigger. So this First Nation was the one that had all the, we can actually make it happen in place. And that's why it started with Sinanaimak. Promotion of dialogues to foster greater knowledge about the strengths of traditional medicines in practice, which would be transformative to community health. And discussions would encourage we were hoping that the discussions would encourage young people to study medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, and Indigenous medicines revival. So I just want to say on this slide that Joe Gallagher, the CEO of the First Nation Health Authority, had hoped that this project would serve as a model not only to transform delivery of healthcare services in First Nations, but also that would develop a model for residents of BC so that people could use seamlessly models of traditional medicines and Western medicines. So the funding to the project, funding came from each of the partners and lasted for 6 months. And I took the lead for running the day-to-day program. Implemented in 2017, we had a traditional opening ceremony, and we had a grand clinic in the rec center where all the community, there was a bunch of traditional Chinese medicine practitioners, fees, singing and drumming, the Chinese practitioners, traditional Chinese practitioners, and the First Nation practitioners were sharing and teaching each other language. So really beautiful, and just the sharing of culture. And then May 11th, 2017 was when we opened up our clinic. The doors opened. So this was just a photo of the opening ceremony that we had. From the moment we opened the doors, the clinic was thriving and full, which was incredible, just to see all these people lining up for Chinese medicine on a First Nation clinic. People really wanted to see, what is this about? And we had males, females, all ages, acute chronic diseases. People just came in. So almost right away, I think it was within the first 3 months, the leadership came to me and said, you know, we really have been seeing that people with different addictions, mostly addiction to opioids, were coming to the clinic and had an interest in coming. Is there any way that we can open up a specific clinic for opioid addiction? And we did that. We didn't have the space for it. So the CEO of the community gave her office. And so we used her office and had people come in twice a week to just to deal with opioid epidemic. We integrated it with the Western medical doctors. So it was really nice to see, because they were concerned about how do we help people, but not by giving more opioids. So this is, we did start it, and the First Nation funded it, and it only lasted about 6 months. So we didn't have enough funding to keep going, but we now incorporate this kind of service in our clinic. We do have a doctors group that meets regularly. We talk about issues of how to actually deliver services for First Nation residents. We talk about cultural safety issues, case management. So who needs what, and how do we help each other? And we do talk about, and we do house calls for chronic and terminal patients. Just a quick note on the historical connections. So I come from Manitoba, and when I was working at the university in Manitoba, I brought up the idea of Chinese medicine with First Nation. I think the reason that it really took off here in BC is because of the historical connection that is more than 200 years old. So there was Professor Henry Yu at the University of BC who did some research about the relationship between Chinese and First Nations, which is very beautiful. It's always been a symbiotic relationship. The elders who come to my clinic at first were telling stories about how their parents would go and travel to Vancouver and see these Chinese medical doctors and get herbs, and they would have to knock on the back doors, and it wasn't really a legal thing at the time. So they would come and they would get these medicines, and they talked about how they got, maybe it helped them to get pregnant, or maybe it helped them with their illness or their arthritic pains, or so they have these memories, they have these stories, and they brought them, which is probably had a lot to do with why people just gravitated into the clinic without question. they did call themselves the Porcupine Nation when they first met me. So kind of had fun with it. And then values and practice. So again, just active participation of clients in their health decisions as a part of how we do our work. We bring in oral histories and personal experiences. So stories are part of the healing. Foremost, establish trust. So trust is a big thing. And the use of herbs, etc., and value of the land. So that's really, with the traditional Chinese medicine, it's more of a system that's in place and easy to teach and share than with the traditional medicine, indigenous traditional medicines. But what happens is people might come to me and we might talk about herbs, we might talk about whatever, massage or any kind of treatment. And then the patients will say, hey, I have a herb. And they'll talk about what that herb is. And we'll try to talk about, well, why would you use that herb and what the properties might be. So that goes back to the original intent of the program, to build conversation about methods of healing and about herbs and about the use of traditional practices for health. So today, one of the original, since the beginning, since 2017, there was the goal of building a new health center. And once that health center was built, that the nation wanted to have a space for traditional medicines. So that actually happened. And this is a photo of the symbolic dig for the space for the First Nation clinic. Their traditional healing lodge is behind the trees. And so this was the concept. And today I practice, so the picture's not that wonderful, but it really does look like this. So I do have a space for the traditional medicines. We have the doctors' clinics, dentists. We have it's not built, it's not ready yet, the section for the pharmacy, but the idea is for us to have pharmacy and traditional herbs to offer to the people right there. So it's a beautiful health center. It's I want to say full, but pandemic full. So we've got all the right now, actually, we have an outbreak in the community. So I'm seeing the healthcare providers, frontline workers, and but the clinic this month hasn't been open to the patients. So I'm working with the healthcare providers, and then the nurses and the doctors, and then they're seeing people based on urgency, and also, of course, through video conferencing. Okay, so really quick, future plans for Nanaimo First Nation. Long-term continued funding for an expanded acupuncture clinic. Now the clinic's going 3 days a week. We really want to keep expanding. It seems like no matter how many days we had it out, 1 day, 2 day, now 3 days, that keeps filling. So that's really exciting. Regular implementation and expansion of community outreach events like community clinics, on the land retreats, an expansion of the herbal medicines component of the clinic into that pharmacy and herbal space that I was just describing, and integration. We have accomplished that one. For the partners, so what the discussion that we still have is determine appropriate funding plan to keep going. So if we were to add more TCM practitioners, how do we fund this? We want to build in evaluation plans, and then build on perhaps having it so that we have one director of TCM that oversees a program where there are practitioners in multiple First Nation communities. So how do we develop from one community to more, possibly every community on the island? And then how do we establish more secure funding? Like, so there's conversations about these things going on in the First Nation, but also with First Nation Health Authority. So still planning how to grow. And that's it. I think that's it.
Well, thank you so much. It's very inspiring. I know this is a topic that a lot of colleagues have been mentioning, that they really want to implement their own projects, and they want to do, everybody, you know, would like to integrate more with the Indigenous community. So it's really great to see a project that's been doing so well. We do have some questions, and now feel free for everyone to add some more in the chat box, but I'll start with the ones that have been already asked. So Vidu asked, good morning, everyone. I would like to know if the patient's clients are actively referred to such alternative treatment models in BC, or is it entirely voluntary? Does healthcare in BC cover this under public health insurance? I think you touched a little bit on this, but maybe you could go a little bit more in more detail.
Okay, so with our model, like now the First Nation Health, like funding to First Nations to so that they can get you know, acupuncture or a physiotherapist or any of those kind of massage, those kind of services fall under Blue Cross. So there is a method of, you know, provincial funding in place. For the way that we run our clinic, the First Nation covers it out of their own funding. So they can use, they have a pot of funding, and they can use that funding in whatever way they choose for health of the First Nation. They're paying for it that way. What we want to have is, and that's still in discussion, is how do we develop this so that healthcare is covered so that people can come. Like, you know, all First Nations can come and seek acupuncture services. We still don't actually have that in place.
Yeah, I feel like that's always the biggest issue.
Yeah.
Which, on that note, a question that came up was, what are some of the biggest challenges you found in the early stages of introducing this project? Like in the conception phase, in the getting the interest, what did you find the biggest challenge was, and how did you approach that?
I think going back, like the first thing that popped into my mind with that question is it really was an issue to find a First Nation that actually had space. The health centers are built and then fill up really quickly. I think there's a lot of, you know, health needs. So even the nurses, in one community that we went to, they really wanted acupuncture, but they were like, where are we going to put this? We know you'll be busy. The nurses are, you know, they don't even have room for the work that they're doing. So space was a real issue. In terms of, and then funding, securing funding, like for the First Nation to fund it on their own, I think is just a testament to how much they want it in the community. Because there's not a lot of funds to go around. People are always trying to find more. So to say, okay, well, we're going to give this and we're going to do acupuncture is really huge. In terms of actually practicing traditional Chinese medicine, that was a non-issue. It was sold from the beginning. And I think it's because of what I said before, like people remember their grandparents, their parents coming home with these stories of these amazing physicians that treated this and this, or you know, got their mom pregnant or whatever it is. So it wasn't a foreign thing.
Thank you.
Mostly the answer would be about that space.
Space, yeah. Marie had a question, which I think we can partially answer. It's more probably one that would be great on a discussion forum. My future plan is to have an auricular therapy as a standalone treatment model. Does anyone have experience with auricular medicine and how effective it might be as a project similar to this project being discussed? And I imagine it's beyond the NADA protocol here for addiction.
You know, I just want to say really quickly, I'm really glad that question was raised, because so with the wellness program and with all of the discussions that we do, it's interesting working with this community. The interest is in what can we do to help complement health, to help transform healthcare, and that was the interest with the First Nation Health Authority too. Whether it was naturopathic doctors, or it wasn't, yes, traditional Chinese medicine fit for a lot of different reasons. The traditions, the how do you, build the way that they did it in Southeast Asia with the integrative model, but the interest in really just bringing in alternative therapies so that people could discuss health from all kinds of angles was the interest, was part of the discussion from the beginning. Mm-hmm.
Great. Marie, Vidhu had a follow-up to Marie's question, which was another question is similar to Marie, which is, does this integrative model include several other alternative streams as holistic treatment beyond acupuncture, like yoga, Ayurveda, and many more? Vidhu comes, the Indian piece is coming in. This is wonderful. If not, are there considerations for future or this for this pilot project if it's funded specifically for these treatments?
Well, you know what, there's a definite interest. And again, it's just a matter of like, if we can figure out how to fund it, there's a definite interest. We were even talking about Thai massage. So Ayurvedics would be a great interest because it's a traditional medicine, and conversations about traditions and traditional medicinals and herbs and how do you do things on your own, and the stories of where things come from serves to grow a lot of the issues surrounding decolonization, identity, heredity. So yes, absolutely. There's an interest.
Yeah, it sounds like interest it's never the issue.
Yeah.
Now this is a question that came to mind because most of us who are interested in creating these programs and working with Indigenous communities are not First Nations ourselves. So the question would be, what is the most important way as practitioners we can ensure that we're respecting the First Nations culture when implementing a different cultural medicine?
I think first of all, there's a basic cultural safety training that's important. And I think with me, I spent my entire adult life working with Indigenous communities, and I'm Middle Eastern myself and have different, I understand about culture. And however, I've had to learn, as being an academic, we like to talk, we like to teach. I had to learn to step back and listen and understand that I don't have all the answers, and wait to be invited as well. As I would have to offer what I know and how I believe I can help. But as a person coming in from the outside, it's really important to get to know the community, to spend time in community events and celebrations, and go to people's houses and just find out what the people are about. So that's all a part of cultural safety training. I think there's a definite interest in working together, but I think we're decolonizing now, and a part of decolonizing is sitting back and really being true partners. A lot of the work that I did when I first started with the universities and working with First Nations we use the word consultation, but we now know that consultation is really different to what we thought it was even 10 years ago. So I think that's it, is what is the First Nation wanting? What is the community, what are their aspirations and their goals, and how do you fit in? But there's a space for everybody. That's what I learned. This is not a, I think there's a space for everybody to say it.
Humility goes a long way, and sitting back and listening, hey?
Definitely.
Does anybody have any other questions or comments they'd like to share as we wrap up here? Some people are starting their day here and other people are ending it, but as we wrap up this hour, if anyone has any other comments, I'd definitely like to say that it's been a wonderful presentation. It's been very eye-opening and inspiring. So it's definitely got me excited to continue this work. So let's see. I don't see any little bubbles of people commenting. So Lorianne, I don't know if you want to do, we've got some, wait, there was a few things that came in. Wait, is it possible to have access to your project info to set up something similar in Alberta? Or do you know of a project in Alberta? So.
Well, definitely, I would share. Yes, I would be very happy to share. It would be really nice to see this in Alberta. if it is already not there, I don't know of anything that's there, but it would be nice to see it in Alberta. So I will share anything I have.
Okay, that's wonderful. And I think we get your emails through when you join here. So through Healthy Seminars, we can send out maybe some of the information you have. For those who are interested, they'll have access to that. And Alan did write a question. Could you elaborate on the storytelling part of the project? And have you been making any effort to formalize that for the purpose of funding? Have you considered integrating other health approaches to health? So we talked a bit about the other approaches to health, but the first part of the question would be great to hear.
What was how again is the question about the storytelling?
Could you elaborate on the storytelling part of the project, how that was, or maybe what we can do is, Alan, if you wanted to ask the question, I'm just going to unmute you or ask you to unmute yourself. Lorianne, can you help with unmuting Alan? Let's see, I'm hitting the ask to unmute. Okay. Okay, Lorianne's gonna. She's the tech behind it. I'm useless on that department.
I should say that with regards to storytelling, the First Nation even published a couple books on the stories. So one with women, violence against women, and trauma to women's lives. So taking the stories. What are the traditional stories, what it means to be a woman, a caregiver, what it means to love and honor a woman, and then traumatic stories that have happened along the line, where they come from, and what does that all mean for the development of safety programs for women, and the work that we all do in protecting, supporting women, and in teaching appropriate relations and appropriate behaviors to women. So that's one example, but we will really build on stories. There was a time when I had a group, and sometimes they start informally and sometimes more formally, but started with people talking about this dentist issue. So way back when the elders, I guess then there were people in their 70s, so they were 7 years old, they were kids. And a dentist came into the community, and they remember having all their teeth pulled out. one after the other. So stories could be hereditary stories, symbolic stories, even rituals, what the rituals are, or they can be experiences such as this dentistry experience. And then what does it mean? How do you get your power back? And then what is the role of a health provider? Following things like that. So really using stories to bring back an authentic or a whole self. Not all of the things are open, as many of you would know. There's a lot of protection of Indigenous rituals and ceremonies. So it's not like, maybe that's another thing about how to work with First Nations. As an academic, of course, I would like to publish anything and write anything and be the one to teach. But there's a lot that's like, you're welcome and we'd like to share and we trust, but this is not for you to go and publish about. So just a matter of sharing stories and the context of stories and stuff like that, and how you could use it to heal.
I'm unmuted now, Rachel, so maybe I can ask. It's really hard to write what I was curious about, but what I was thinking about mostly was the idea of working with an elder or anyone who's telling a story to produce something that would actually be theirs, not mine or not the organization's, but that would be theirs. To move, take that information or take that knowledge and turn it into something that can support the project, that can support funding, that can support the ideas that are being conveyed in that story and how they are reflected in health and better health for people. That's kind of what I was meaning. And I know that's hard to do, and I know that there are things that you don't talk about publicly and so on. But if there was somebody who saw the value in that, putting that together, maybe even being anonymous, but putting that together so that it comes from the community, and it also legitimizes storytelling, which is one of the hardest things seems today to get people to believe in.
Yes. Yeah. I just think amen to what you just said. And I love how you phrased it, because you made me think of it would go back to December, a talk I had with one of the elders who really did say that she would love to have somebody write her story. So just like that, there's definitely a way to honor stories, share stories, and in the way that you just described. Thanks.
The other part of what I was asking was, I just wondered if other health systems, so whether we're talking about Ayurvedic or we're talking about any other Indigenous way of providing better health to people, if there's receptiveness to that in the health center, and whether you guys have considered bringing those kinds of things in. And I think you answered that a little bit. Mm-hmm. So that's really what I was asking there.
Okay, yes, and the answer definitely is yes.
Well, on that beautiful note, that end, it's 9 o'clock. The hour is reached the end, and but I think that's just the beginning of this conversation. And I want to, everybody can put on their cameras if they want and give a little wave.